last 5 months, is the day that I heard that you have to wear a mask to buy and sell. I was disturbed greatly for a day and a half. Just, I could not believe this was actually being said, because it is the exact same thing that will be said in at the midpoint of the tribulation, when everybody has to take a mark. Okay, so what I mean then is that by stage setting is that, as you can see on your chart, this happens during the church age, but you'll also notice that, because you got the 7 churches. That's 7 churches of Revelation. We'll talk about that too. But look, you see this box. I let it go past the line of the rapture, okay, over toward the 7-year covenant. So that means that these stage-setting events can continue after the rapture, okay, up to this, period of the 7-year covenant. So all these things don't have to transpire exclusively in the church age. They could continue. Some of these could really, take off after the rapture. They could. I didn't say they would. They could. Okay? So that's why I've been, cautious on that point, and that's the caution I'm putting in there. Look at the 7 churches on your list, okay? Some people have said these are periods in church history. The early church, they say, was cold orthodoxy, like Ephesus. Then you went into the period of martyrdom in the Roman Empire, and Diocletian and all that. The period of compromise, the period of tolerance, and they kind of move these through church history. I've never been, and that's called the historico-prophetical view. I've never been convinced of that view. I think this is representative of, these 7 churches are representative of churches throughout the whole church age. So people have asked me, when I go to a local church, I will always, over a period of time, evaluate that local church if I'm there, like I did at Fredericksburg, or like I would do here, obviously in my own mind, and say, where are we? What is this local church most like? So, you can have churches that are cold orthodoxy. They're orthodox, but they don't have love. Okay, that was the problem at Ephesus. We still have churches like that today. Okay, Smyrna, martyrdom. Okay, well, not in America. We don't have many people being martyred for the faith, but we certainly do in other countries of the world where Christians are martyred. Okay, so that's a present phenomena. The Church of Compromise. If that one's not, readily apparent, well, we got more problems than we thought. Tolerance, Thyatira, okay, just tolerating error in their midst. Complacency, this is the church that said, we've got this rich heritage and everything, but then, that's all they had was just a reputation. There was nothing there. They were just complacent, okay, and a lot of the church in America, I think, is complacent. Deliverance, the Church of Deliverance or the Rapture, that's the Church of Philadelphia. They were looking for the rapture. This is the only church that is never condemned for anything. Okay, so I guess we could aim for that one. Let's be like them. Laodicea, lukewarm. Of course, he says, be hot or cold, but as you are, I just want to spit you out of my mouth, right? So these are reflective of churches today. And of course, these are the 7 major things that Christ said about these churches. So every local church, every member in every local church needs to go, where is our church? And what do we need to do to correct it? Right? What do we need to do to correct it? On this, since I'm here, there was a question, and it's on I'll tell you what page it's on. Well, do you have all the handouts? I don't think you have all the handouts. Some of you have all the handouts. There's a handout for each hour. Where's the question? The questions are on page 19. And the question about these 7 churches, are the letters to the 7 churches in Revelation 2 and 3 written to believers or to unbelievers and believers? In other words, is it believers only, or are they written to mixed group? Okay. Well, obviously, the letters are written to angels. We can talk a bit more about that later. I don't think these are pastors. I could tell you why, but these angels serve as witnesses, like they did at Mount Sinai. There were angels at Mount Sinai when God gave the law, and throughout the Old Testament, the angelic realm served as witnesses to Israel's behavior and God's behavior. So they're the court witnesses. In the same way, these are written to angels who are witnesses of the churches and how they respond to Christ's message to them. Most indications, though, of course, are that the letters are addressing, obviously, the believers who are in these churches, okay? The believers. And these believers are being commended, or they're being condemned, or both, and they're being challenged to repent. So the angel's not being commanded to repent, but the people in the church are. So there are indications that unbelievers are present in some of these assemblies in Revelation 2 and 3, and they're influencing the churches, but the letters themselves are addressed to the believers in those churches who are being influenced by these dangerous people. Okay? So they're addressed to believers, I think. Also, number 2, another question about this was the promises at the end of each letter. Remember, each one says, to he who overcomes, I grant to, whatever, sit down with me and reign with, or whatever. Or to him who overcomes, I will grant to eat of the tree of life, and so forth. Are these promises to all believers or to a special class of believers, or a combination of both? Okay. To me, these are tough. I've taught both ways when I taught through the book of Revelation. I think that most indications, if you just read them plainly, is that it's speaking about rewards for believers who overcome. But I would not say that what these rewards do is divide believers into 2 classes. Okay, that is something that some people are doing. I don't think you can divide the body of Christ into 2 classes. I think the body of Christ is the body of Christ, and it's one whole. It can't be divided in that way. But I do think they are relate to rewards. Okay, so that's where we are as far as in church history and some of the stage-setting events that are transpiring to set things up for Bible prophecy. I've mentioned on the outline on page 1, Roman numeral 1, recent events, and I've mentioned some of those. Okay, I didn't mention all of these. Like I didn't mention communism, the Joe McCarthy, I think I misspelled that, but the Joe McCarthy era. Joe called a lot of people out, right? But he didn't have a lot of evidence, so he kind of got run under the bus, even though he was right. Communism has come into the educational system, and there's a plan, and that plan remarkably has transpired in our education system. And probably a lot of what we're seeing today is a result of several generations being trained under educational principles that are not, they're Marxist-Leninist. So there's been a core weakening in our education. I didn't mention the Iranian Revolution in 1979, Khomeini, but that was really the rise of modern Islam, and it's 2 ways of waging war. And we won't go into all that, but Shahram Hadian used to live down here in the valley, so if you've been around here long and listened to Shahram, you would know a lot about Islam and what's going on, because he comes right out of Persia. He's Iranian, and he left during the Iranian Revolution, came to America, so he knows exactly what's going on, and I suggest listening to everything he says about Islam. The EU in 1993, let's not go into that right now, but this is Europe trying to break away from their dependence on the U.S. The rise of tech and globalism, we talked about that. Climate change, anthropogenic global warming. In other words, man-caused global warming, which is it's a result of politicized science. Science has been politicized. I was in science, I got a degree in biology and minor in chemistry in the 90s, and then what's going on is really politicized science. It's not just unbiased looking at data anymore and following the facts where they lead. It's you get money to manipulate data to support a political agenda, okay? And if you don't go along with that program, then you don't get grant money. So because professors want to keep their jobs and they want to have their 401ks and all of that, they of course go along with the program because this is the way to keep the money rolling into their pockets so they can have a retirement. So science has been greatly politicized, and those who go against what is politically right in the science departments or whatever, they don't get funded, and so that's the end of their careers. China and the World Trade Organization, 2001, we'll talk more about that in a minute. Corruption in the U.S. governments, all the way from Watergate, the Benghazi affair. So we could mention 100 things here, right? Voter fraud, all these things, okay? And, of course, the war on terror. So these are just recent events, okay, in the media, which is owned by all the same people, so it's all the same voice. It's just one thing said over and over and over. And actually on Google yesterday, what did it say? On Google is no longer going to put up anything related to what's going on right now that is so-called conspiracy theory. So there's no free speech. I mean, this is total control of thinking, total control of what influences we will all hear, and that's the way they play the game. But current events, COVID-19, the so-called racism with the George Floyd affair, the civil unrest and tearing down of monuments and all that, these are situations that are being exploited to a remarkable degree, and most people, because they've been on mainstream media diet for so many years, you just want to go right along with the program. And I'll talk about interpretations of these things in the next section. So Antifa, this is a group of trained Marxists. I mean, they're designed to bring about chaos in society, civil unrest. That's the point. In fact, the third pillar in the communist takeover is cause civil unrest. And they say that process that will only take 6 weeks, okay? Whereas the previous 2 steps take about 25 years. Okay, so this could be where we are there. Black Lives Matter, again, it has nothing to do with that phrase, by the way. It doesn't. Black Lives Matter is just an expression. That's not what it means. It's not about that. It's about breaking down nuclear family. They hate the family. They want global family. They want communal family, I should say. It's about transgenderism. It's against cis heterosexual marriage. It is totally opposed to that. Okay, it doesn't have anything to do with blacks, whites, purple people, eaters. It doesn't have anything to do with that. Okay, it has totally to do with all these other things. Okay, and that's just a phrase that's supposed to get people to feel guilty about what happened in our country 200 150 years ago. All that stuff. Okay, it doesn't have anything to do with that. And that's why if you say, well, all lives matter, they're just going to go ballistic on you. Okay, that what they're really about is all these other things. You can go read their website. They are also trained Marxists. So they hate God. They hate the divine institutions. So, okay, interpretations of what is happening now with COVID, the George Floyd and so forth. Well, the first is just a sincere government view. The government is concerned about people's health, and they're just responding to a new virus. And so we need to close businesses and institutions so we can reduce the threat. We will gradually reopen businesses based on number of cases, which, oh my goodness, there's an hour right there on number of cases. What constitutes a case? If you had a test, is that a case? Yeah. Even if it was negative, yeah, that's a case. Okay, so there's a whole discussions there. And any old mask can be worn or is to be worn to prevent the transmission of the virus. The economy cannot fully resume until more testing is done and a vaccine is developed. Okay. Well, this view is unlikely because the hospitals are not overwhelmed. The death rate is so low. The contradiction in mask wearing policies. Remember, first we were told wear an N95 mask. Here's how you put it on. I mean, all these details on the news about how to wear one, which no one wears one that way anyway at all that I've ever seen. Okay, there's little gaps and, breath is coming up on your eyes and on all this stuff, and that's not how you're supposed to be worn. But anyway, we're initially told you must wear an N95 mask. Then we're told you don't need to wear a mask at all. You need to socially distance. And now we're told you can wear any old mask. But see, it doesn't matter what the facts are. CDC, WHO, it doesn't matter what they say. People who are on mainstream media are the same types of people. They lie too. That's why they are for this. It's just like Romans 2, the last verse of Romans 2, and the first verse of Romans 3. They will approve of those who do the same things that they do. Okay? We are given the scriptures. These are to give us eyes to see. Okay? Last verse of Romans 1 and first verse of Romans 2. Sorry. Okay? And although they know the ordinance of God, that those who practice such things, there's a list of like 25 things there, those who practice such things are worthy of death, they not only do the same, but also give hearty approval to those who practice them. Okay, lies, deceit, malice. You wonder why, I tell people over and over, okay, well they told us this and now they're telling us this. Why are you believing these people? This is why. because they are the same way. It says they not only do the same, but then they give hearty approval to those who practice the same things. Okay? This is a principle. Paul told us about this. You have to watch out for this. Okay? So I really doubt that this sincere government view or political view is correct. The inconsistency in application of essential businesses. We all saw that. The vaccine salvation solution. And that does serve the needs of certain globalist elites like Bill Gates, who funds that stuff heavily, including funding the World Health Organization and CDC. And this also works, all of it works toward an economic restructuring, a global restructuring of the economy. That's letter B. This view of the economic restructuring is using coronavirus as a public distraction, while global debt is being restructured behind the scenes. And that's one thing, obviously, with media you always have to be concerned about. If all the mainstream media, all 5 of them, are owned basically by the same voice, then they'll get everybody looking over here while they're over there doing other stuff. Okay? And that is so easy to do. They have like total power over this and total control. And the best thing people in America could do is turn off their TVs and throw them out the window. Viable cryptocurrencies are now on the rise. China's implemented a digital currency. It's designed to replace the US dollar as the reserve currency. Reserve currency means international money. It's the money that would be held in banks and is involved in international trade. Usually the reserve currency in any bank around the world will be about 60% of what they're holding will be in the US dollar, okay? Available for international trade. So we want to get away from cash, right? Because we can't trace that. We don't know what's going on. We don't know what you're doing. We'd like to know where you are at every moment because we want to control people. When we get to Daniel, you'll see in the book of Daniel, the 4th empire, which is Rome, and it has an ancient and it has a future phase. That future phase, the problem with that future phase is trying to hold it all together. Remember, it says that there are 10 kingdoms, and some of them are made of iron and some of them are made of clay, and that it says those don't go together. You can't get clay and iron to hold together. The struggle and challenge for the last empire before Christ returns to establish his kingdom is holding it all together, okay? And so cash is a thing that will not allow things to hold together because they can't control that. It's outside their control. You can't slip your neighbor, a $20 bill for mowing your yard. You can't, They want to be able to control everybody and what transactions are going on, okay? They don't want black markets, okay? They want to control all markets. They want to control people, okay? All right, so that's going to relate to the New World economy, okay? Interest rates they're dropping. They've already become negative in Japan. What will happen is, people want to pull their money out of the bank, and banks don't want to do that. So to safeguard that, they would replace cash with a new digital currency. That way they can control or try to control more the money supply. Digitally coded currency that requires you to spend money in certain businesses that are deemed socially acceptable. I mean, to an extent, we're already seeing that. Not the digitally coded currency, but what we're seeing is we are being directed to buy and sell at certain businesses, namely those that are online, like Amazon. Okay, I'm not saying they're the devil or anything. I'm just saying, they are able through this whole buy-sell thing to put people in fear and get them to stay home and spend their money in certain places. Who benefits from all that? Who benefits? See, there's always going to be somebody who's benefiting. This doesn't just happen, okay? And they're also already doing this by forcing us to wear masks in businesses. That's what I was talking about, okay? Very possible and a precursor to the tribulation. So the whole economic restructuring view is possible, okay? And it does play a role in here. The economic war with China view, okay? China was admitted to the World Trade Organization in 2001. They were introduced as a developing nation. This gave them certain liberties, okay? It was much less burdensome on them. They could do things a lot easier, okay? Now they have doubled their gross domestic product. They're now doubling it every 8 years. Okay, they're obviously cheating the system too. So they get really lax rules under the World Trade Organization, and they're cheating too, which is pretty common for China. Nobody should be surprised about that. And Trump didn't like this. Okay, so he really clamped down, took legal measures, and he has basically dissolved the strength of the World Trade Organization. And he's trying to build America's economy. That's what he said he would do, and that's what he's been trying to do. Okay, and they're trying to destroy that right now because that is one of the two major factors every election year in re-election for an incumbent. Is the economy good? If the economy is good, that's good for Trump. But if they can wreck the economy, then that's not good, and that is what is going on, at least on a local scale. Okay, and that's the anti-Trump view. That's later, but these things play together. Okay, so with the World Trade Organization basically impotent now, we are kind of going into uncharted waters as far as international trade. This will be interesting. Globalist elites view, Bill Gates, other wealthy poor people, the Soros, George Soros, Rockefellers, whatever. They're waging a war against the growing tide of nationalism in America and around the world. Nationalism is out. I'm sure you noticed this. Okay, people do not want this. They want global village. Okay, coronavirus plays into this because Gates is a major funder for the development of vaccines for global distribution. It's called Gavi. Okay, that's his organization that he heavily funds. He is funding the development of digital identity with Gavi. You got to have this digital identity to go along with the fact you've been vaccinated. This is to be mandatory for every man, woman, and child on earth. Okay. He and others wield an enormous level of power and influence on global agencies such as the World Health Organization and the CDC. Now this is interesting because this is just in Pullman, right over here. As of 2017, his foundation had donated nearly $1.25 billion to the University of Washington, including global health, education, law, and other areas, making the Institutes for Health Metrics and Evaluation the trusted source for the World Bank, United States Agency for International Development, the NIH, National Institute of Health, the Wellcome Trust, and a range of other national and global organizations. So some are national, but a lot of them are global. That's what they're using is down at the University of Washington, using their health metrics, to scare the world. I looked at them way back in March. I don't know, I can't remember, something like 2 million or whatever people were going to die. It was wild. Well, that's all funded by somebody who wants it to be wild, so that he can come in and save the day with some vaccines. The anti-Trump political view, which I've already mentioned. The whole thing's being blown out of proportion to defeat Trump in the election year. The economy, he's built this. And 2019 was an amazing year for our economy. It was a remarkable year for our economy. And now, they want to get rid of all that so they can take over the White House. Okay. Several of these views are working together at the same time toward end times prophecy, letter F. So I'll just kind of read through this. The anti-Trump view, again, designed to stop Trump from getting back into office, right? This will move things toward end times prophecy. They want to get rid of Trump. Short. Things like coronavirus, the George Floyd situation are instrumental to meeting their goals, bringing about chaos. Okay. If the economy fails, though, here's what will happen. More than likely, there will be a new reserve currency that is digital. They'll use it as an opportunity to bring this about. China's already got a digital currency. This will play into a much larger situation, whether people see it or not, where globalists are attempting to destroy nationalism. It'll lead to larger power blocks, regions of power. What I think of when I read the Bible and I read about the 10 kings and so forth in Daniel and in Revelation is I think of an oligarchy. It's a little bit bigger than oligarchy. Usually goes up to like 8, but 10. Rather than individual nations, bigger power blocks. Okay. These kings that I think will come about that rule, I don't think they're your major figureheads like presidents, okay, and world leaders or whatever of countries. I think they're people that are behind the scene. I think they're ultra rich. I think they're ultra powerful. I think that's So it's not like, can I see 10 presidents or something on earth and now I've got the 10 kings? I don't think that's it at all. I think it's people behind them. I think it's behind the scenes. Okay? I think believers have to, keep their eyes open. It's not that easy. Mask wearing, as controversial as it is, I would say that in the medical journals I've read over the last 15 years, they're ineffective whether they are N95 masks or they are surgical masks. They don't do anything. Viruses are really tiny. I don't know. People just they don't realize the tininess. I mean, a cell is way bigger than a virus. A cell, have you ever seen a cell? I haven't seen a cell. I can't see cells. I mean, if you get in a microscope, you get in, or you can see these things, but like you can't see these things. I guess they don't realize how tiny they really are. So, anyway, but they are, okay? We're being told to wear them really as a test of compliance, even though we already know doctors that are readily treating people who have COVID-19 for $50 or less, okay? But those aren't, the CDC and the World Health, they're not saying, oh yeah, just go down to your doctor and he'll give you this, and you'll be fine and it'll cost you $25. They're not telling that but instead what they're saying is, we're trying to help you by telling you to wear a mask, and then in the meantime, while you're wearing your mask and we're keeping you safe by you wearing your mask, which, I don't know, it could be a bandana, it could be anything, we're over here getting a vaccine ready that will save you, okay? So that's what's probably really going on. And this is just conditioning people, like I said earlier. It's conditioning people, it's preparing them that if they want to be a functioning member of society, they must go along with the people who are really caring for them, which is the government and political and these World Health Organizations that are funded by ultra-elite people. Okay? I talk to people, every person I talk to on Facebook, such a wide, vast experience of mine, but every one of them who is like avid mask wearers, they're all saying, when that vaccine comes out, I can't wait to get it. They're all telling me that, okay? As I ask them. And they're going to do the same thing if they go into the tribulation and the mark is presented. They'll do that. Unless by that time, by God's grace, they will have woken up, right, and they understand what is going on. Okay? And we don't know exactly everything that is going to take place, and I don't want to give that impression. Okay? But all these things contribute to the one world economy, the one world government, and the one world religion that is going to finally come. And we have seen a lot happen in the last 75 years that nobody in the history of the church ever saw. Okay? And I still, Christian, it can be another 100 years or 200 years or 1,000 years or whatever. I don't think that's how God works. I've never seen God work that way. For example, in the Exodus, when he heard the cries of the people of Israel, he didn't go, I'll wait another few hundred years. No, when he starts to make a move, he usually doesn't pull back. Okay? He usually moves things forward. And, with Israel in the land, Islam on the rise, that sets things up for a battle of Gog and Magog. I mean, you've got all this stuff that's preparing for the one world religion there. You've got all this stuff conditioned for globalism and larger blocks of power. You've got all these pieces that are coming together, okay? So in my mind, this is only inches away. It's not miles, okay? But I'm not a prophet, so don't go with me, okay? Just put your eyes on. But all that said, who could organize all these events on a global scale? See, there is no human who can mastermind and organize all these things. And this is where the real battle is waging. Okay, it's not with the Bill Gates, okay, and it's not with China, okay? It's with the prince of the power of the air who is behind the scenes. He's an invisible mastermind, ultra brilliant. Einstein is an idiot compared to Satan, okay? He is the only one with the number of forces demonic to influence, okay, events to correlate in such a way to bring about end times Bible prophecy, okay? Look at Daniel chapter 7. Daniel 7, and I'll just finish this little section with this. It's right after Ezekiel. Daniel's a little smaller than Ezekiel, so sometimes if you see Ezekiel, you can get there. You see in those first few verses this dream and vision that Daniel saw as he lay on his bed, and he wrote the dream down. And here's the summary of it, okay? He says he was looking in his vision by night, verse 2, and behold, 4 winds of heaven stirring up the great sea, and 4 great beasts are coming up from the sea, different from one another, okay? The 4 winds of heaven are demonic forces, okay? And the great sea are the sea of peoples, okay? Humanity, the mass of humanity, okay? And out of the mass of humanity that's being stirred up by demonic forces, 4 kingdoms arise. We know the kingdoms: Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, okay? The point is to understand how demonic forces work. They're like wind on water. That's what demons do to people. They stir people up. That's why whenever we see chaos in society, which we've seen a little bit of that the last 4 months, you can be very, very confident that Satan is behind this. Okay? This is a description of what happens in Gentile kingdoms in verse 2. This is how it works. Okay? Ephesians 2. Well, hold your place in Daniel, by the way. Hold your place in Daniel, because I'm going to come right back to chapter 10. But look at Ephesians 2. I just think in America we just don't think about the spiritual warfare that's going on enough. And the reason is because we're so scientific in America. We're not in Africa, some tribal religion, where we think there's all these spirits and stuff like that. That's not America. America's scientism, supposed to be rationalism, but anyway, we won't get into that conversation. But we need hardcore evidence, visible material. Everything's physical. We're naturally kind of programmed to not think about spirit realm. Okay? But look at chapter 2 of Ephesians, verse 1. This is talking about what we used to be before we were Christians. You were dead in your trespasses and sins in which you formerly walked according to the course of this world. See, there was a way in which we walked. We walked according to the course of this world. And who is governing the world? It says, according to the prince of the power of the air, of the spirit that is now working in the sons of disobedience. Inside. Okay? Not just influence, there is influence, but also possession. Okay? And we are naive if we don't think that our unbelieving friends, and especially unbelievers in high places like universities where they train the next generation, or in governments, are not heavily influenced, if not possessed, by demons themselves. Because this is the way they are walking according to what the demons want them to do. Okay? According to the prince of the power of the air, of the spirit that is now working in the sons of disobedience. Among them we too all formerly lived in the lust of the flesh, indulging the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature children of wrath, even as the rest. See, that's where we used to be. Okay? But by the mercy of God, we're saved out of that. See? But they're not. They're still walking this way. They think they're doing what they want to do, but they're not. They're slaves to demonic forces. That's why, I can't go with the genuine political government view of what's happening right now, that they really care about us, because I know who they're walking according to, and the Bible told me. The Bible tells me so. Daniel 10, verse 13. This whole chapter is about the fact that there are demons fighting with good angels in the heavenlies above each nation. That there are certain demons that are over the United States of America right now, waging war here. It's an unseen conflict, but we say, when you see the chaos down here, it's no longer unseen. You're seeing it. We're seeing what's coming out of people now it's been there for a long time, but all this kind of transpired, and all of a sudden you're just seeing it, and very visibly what was inside all along. Okay, and in Daniel 10, verse 13, this angel is speaking to Daniel in verse 12. He said, "Don't be afraid, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart on understanding this and on humbling yourself before God, your words were heard, and I have come in response to your words." So this is a good angel who has come to give Daniel understanding, right? Verse 13, "But the prince of the kingdom of Persia was withstanding me for 21 days. Who's that? You really think that's a human prince who was withstanding this angel that was trying to come? No. This is the one who's over Persia, the real one who's ruling behind the power at that time, the human power at that time. See, and that's what goes on. And Paul faced this in the book of Acts. You say, well, that's Old Testament. Yeah, well, what do you do with Paul in Crete when he's preaching to the guy who rules the island of Crete, and the guy was extremely demonically possessed, and Paul casts the demon out of the ruler? Okay, this is what's really going on. Okay, we're not seeing real people. We're seeing people that are really under demonic oppression and influence. Okay, and that's why I'm like, I have trouble going along with a lot of this. See, the other side of it is you say, well, it wasn't like this 50 or 75 or 100 years ago. Well, yes, it was, but you've got to realize also, right, that Satan loves to mimic morality. That's happening right now. I've seen this more and more. The concept that wearing a mask, for example, to show Christ's love to others, that is a counterfeit love. It's counterfeit. And Satan loves to counterfeit the fruit of the Spirit. Okay? Caring, we care for you. No, they want to control you. They want to control you. Okay? This goes on. We have to, start thinking, okay, and not forgetting what God has said. Okay? The world cannot produce the fruit of the Spirit. Okay? So all that's going to be a counterfeit. It's just by definition a counterfeit. Ephesians, back to Ephesians. Sorry, I should have said hold your place there, and we'll finish with just Ephesians 6. But we have to remember that we have to put on the armor of God, right? Galatians, Ephesians, chapter 6. How do we enter into this spiritual conflict that's raging around us? Look at is it verse 11? Yeah, verse 11. Put on the full armor of God. Now, this is something, by the way, you have to do every day, and verse 18 tells us how to do it. You put it on with prayer and petition, praying at all times in the Spirit. Okay, that's how we put it on. Okay, put on the full armor of God so you will be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil. Okay, that word is methodia. Okay, we get method from that word, right? A method. Okay, but the word refers to crafty schemes, deceitful stratagems. Okay, deceitful stratagems is in a lexicon. It says that word means deceitful stratagems. Okay, we have to put on the full armor of God daily in order to be able to stand against deceitful stratagems. They are there. We don't want to be taken captive. Paul says in Colossians 2:8, do not be taken captive by the elementary principles of this world. Rather, take captive every thought to Jesus Christ. Okay, so we're in a war. Okay. And it's a spiritual warfare that the believer is engaged in every day to sort through what's a stratagem, what's a deception. And the only way we can do that is if we have this in our soul. Okay? This is the playbook for the believer. There's nothing else. Not my best friend works for that company. I don't care. I don't care who they are and or what they say. This is the final authority. Okay? All right. I could go on, but I'm not, because I went over my time. But we did start late, so I have a little excuse. Are there comments or questions? Snide comments? Yeah, Ron. Yes. That's an excellent verse. Y'all hear Luke 4, verse 4, I believe, where the temptations he offers Jesus all the kingdoms of the world. And he could legitimately give them because he says, yes, he said they were handed over to me. That's Adam. And he's had them ever since. Who will... Yes, another excellent point, that 1 Kings 22, who will be a lying spirit in the mouth of Micaiah, and he goes forth. And so there are lying demons that come and produce lies through people, and they transmit this stuff, right? That's what you're getting at, right?
Right, and people are open to that, so they're readily able to receive that in some manner. I don't know how it's happening.
Yeah, yeah, I don't either. I don't know how it happens, but we know that it does happen. So, okay, very, very good. Great comments. Yeah, Glenn? Yeah. Yeah, that's dirty. The argument for the cash right now will be, well, it's dirty, you know, and so we don't want that or whatever. That's, again, that's just another, yeah. So, yeah, I push toward the cashlessness. Yep,
When that happens, there's always a black market that springs up,
yeah.
and they'll accept cash and probably pre-64 coins as well, silver coins.
Yeah, I should have gone into, well, I mean, we'll talk a little bit later about what's happened. It was related to a question somebody put in, actually. New world currencies and stuff like that. Yeah, yeah. I thought you had something. Yes, Dick? I've got the end of the, and I'll talk about this when we get to the church. Is that okay? I mean, you might not be here, but I've got the rapture prior to the signing of the 7-year covenant with a gap of time in between. Not, yes? Okay. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, I think it ends at the rapture. Not, what do we call it? The gap theory. There's a reason for that. If you don't have it, it's called, there's a view, Robert Thomas, who was a master seminary, he's still alive, and a few others held to what's called the dual imminency view, that the two things are imminent. Not just the rapture, but also the signing of the covenant. Because for the rapture to be the event that starts the 7-year tribulation, or at the same time, the signing of the covenant between the Antichrist and Israel and the rapture have to happen simultaneously. It's the only way two events could be imminent. So he called dual imminency. He presented this at a pre-trib rapture conference probably in 2003 to 5, somewhere in that range. And most people didn't hold to it, and I'll explain later why I don't hold to it either. But I think there's a gap. I hold to the gap theory. Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, but there's probably hundreds and hundreds of events I can't. I'm too limited. Well, I can guess who you're. Well, that's the way it's always. You're always going to be called a conspiracy. I would say I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I believe in Satan. I believe he's a real person. I don't think anybody can orchestrate all these events, including things that you're talking about. Yeah, and I can guess which foundation and person you're talking about. Okay, let's take some time and get some drink, whatever. Have a good time.